Welcome to Pimpy's Investment Chat, where we keep investment talk simple. And here's your host, Pimpy.
What is going on out there, peeps? All right, let's get back to Iraq because still they are talking about the change in the exchange rate. One thing that's been crossing my mind, Sauter made a campaign promise that he would go in there and do something about the exchange rate of the Iraqi dinar. Now, I don't think he said anything specifically about it, except for he needed to do something that would help the poor out. So with all this chitter chatter going on about the Iraqi dinar exchange rate, it's not just happening within Iraq. Now the IMF is getting involved. My thing is this, the Central Bank of Iraq is actually taking into consideration a lot of input from the International Monetary Fund. Now, again, taking any advice from the World Bank or the IMF is not exactly the smartest thing to do. Keep in mind, they are part of the globalist agenda. So you can't really trust anything they say. In my opinion, you can't really trust anything that the IMF and World Bank have to offer or suggest. Their goal is to devalue the currency down low so that outside investors can come into countries, rape them of their resources, use the citizens for cheap labor, and once they're all done with them, just bounce. They don't care about nothing else about what they can get out of it. So just keep that in mind. Before we keep going, do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button because it does help me get past the YouTube algorithm that keeps me shadow banned and blocked for non-subscribers. And if you're not a subscriber, please do so because when you do, it helps out the channel and I surely do appreciate it. If you're thinking about buying gold and silver, now is the time to buy the shine. Yes, gold has been maintaining above the $1,900 level and silver has been maintaining above the $25 level. So far, so good. If you're going to buy gold and silver, go check out our friends over there at Money Metals Exchange. The link is down below in the description. If you are a first-time buyer and you spend more than $100, use promo code Pimpy, P-I-M-P-Y, and you'll get a free half ounce of silver. So as I was saying yesterday, over there in Iraq, they're still dealing with forming the government. It really does become a pain in the boo-boo. For those of us who were around when they were trying to pick a prime minister after Maliki resigned, we remember how long it took. They didn't just nominate one. They just didn't nominate two. Al-Kadhimi ended up being the third prime minister that had to go through the process. We can only imagine how long this is going to take. We're already in where? We are now into March and the election took place when? October. Yeah. Opening the door for candidacy again for the post of president. Parliament publishes the agenda for the next Saturday session. The House of Representatives announced today, Wednesday, the agenda for next Saturday session, including to open the door for nominations for the post of the presidency. Now, here's my thing. The courts already said it was unconstitutional for a new list. It's my understanding they have to pick a name off the old list. It says the media department of the council stated that the House of Representatives will hold its third session of the first legislative year for the first legislative term on the fifth session. The agenda includes voting to open the nomination for the post of the presidency for the Republic of Iraq. Let's hope they get a president in there. I don't have any problems with the one they got there now. They should just keep him. The central bank proposes to the Iraq government to wait in concluding contracts with Russia. Yeah, so everybody's giving Russia the cold shoulder. I just seen a very interesting video from independent journalists who said there's a whole other side to this story. And they're not talking about so much from Russia as much as what's really going on with Ukraine. When I saw the video, I have to say I was discouraged because the media doesn't seem to want to cover this other side of the story. That's neither here nor there. But we'll be addressing it for sure in Pimpy's News Network. Said the Central Bank of Iraq proposed on Wednesday to the Iraq government to wait and conclude contracts with Russia. So like I said, everybody's giving them the cold shoulder. The governor of the central bank said, "We would like to inform you that as a result of the current war between Russia and Ukraine, the U.S. Treasury has imposed sanctions on Russia's financial and economic institutions for the purpose of limiting Russia's capability in war. And for the purpose of protecting Iraq's financial system, we suggest waiting for the time being." Yeah, they just got their butt out of hot water. The last thing you want to do is cause controversy. Iraq's doing the right thing just by waiting. Barzani holds political talks with Mrs. Blackheart. No problem. He's saying we're doing good. Don't trip. International Monetary warns Iraq and announces its position on the dollar exchange rate. If they had their way, the currency would have been lowered even more. I believe they were proposing 1,600 dinars for every dollar. This allows outside investors to come in and take advantage of the cheaper labor rates. See, the head of the IMF mission to Iraq said in a press statement, policies aimed at containing inflation and its impact should take into account the fragility of recovery in Iraq and the long-term goals of diversifying the economy and strengthening the private sector. It is to avoid making the problem worse by adopting domestic policies that would increase inflation, for example, through expansionary policies. He added the second priority is to implement policies that are carefully targeted to protect the most vulnerable groups. At the same time, it will be important to avoid any measures that could weaken Iraq's economic capabilities without addressing the problem. For example, measures that undermine the competitiveness of local producers and encourage imports will not contribute to realizing the benefits of remembering the groups, if they exist at all, and this explains the scarcity of countries with a fixed exchange rate to raise the value of their currency and economic history. And for the same reasons, it would not be advisable for Iraq to do so. So let me kind of break this down. So what he's saying is, in this part it says, it is important to avoid any measures that would weaken Iraq's economic capabilities without addressing, right here, the competitiveness of local producers and encourage imports. So when your currency is devalued, that means your products that you produce and services are cheaper. So when you export out of your country into other countries, your product is cheaper. You export more because your product costs less because of the cheaper labor. This is why China devalues their currency. This is why Vietnam's currency is devalued. It's low so that companies from around the world go into their countries and take advantage of the cheaper labor cost. But it also allows them to then import from Iraq their products to resell in their own country with a much higher profit margin. It's just greed. So that's what they're talking about. How can you be competitive on an international level if you increase the value of the Iraqi dinar's exchange rate? Remember, labor is taken in consideration when you're calculating your expenses and how much you want to charge for products, services, and goods. So by increasing the value of the dinar, it makes Iraq less competitive on an international level because of the higher labor rates. My concern would be just like China and Vietnam, as well as those other countries, where big corporations move in and then all of a sudden they become influential on elections and policy because they donate a lot of money to candidacies to keep things the way they are. It's status quo. In other words, keep our costs low and we will reward you. That's why I don't like the IMF in there. That's why I don't like the World Bank in there dictating policies. They are globalist people. So that's what this person is saying in a nutshell. If you increase the value of the Iraqi dinar, then it could affect your competitiveness on trade. Also, if you say right here, he does say something, but I think it's funny because you have to pay attention to the choice of words. Realizing the benefits of remembering the weak groups, if they exist at all. And this explains the scarcity of countries with a fixed exchange rate to raise the value of their currency in economic history. What about those who have a floating exchange rate? Not a fixed. In other words, let the markets dictate it. or you could do what's called a dirty float, a managed floating exchange rate. What the banks do is interfere with the exchange rate on an open market if they feel like it's going too far in one direction or another. In other words, if it's getting too strong or if it's getting too weak, they will intervene. That is called a dirty float. It continues by pointing out the rise in prices lead to an erosion of the purchasing power of families, incomes, and savings. And since more than one-fifth of Iraq's population lives in poverty, protecting vulnerable groups from the effects of inflation is of paramount importance. To achieve this, the 2022 budget should give priority to strengthening cash transfers directed to helping families, the poorest during these difficult times. Yeah, so if they're getting any kind of government aid, you have to make the adjustment to the money they receive to make up for the loss in purchasing power when you devalued the dinar. That's one of the things I was talking about. Also, continue to work on improving the coverage of the social protection network will contribute to ensuring assistance to those who are really in dire need of assistance. Of course, that's just common sense. Moreover, linking the increase in pensions, salaries of civil servants, and lower wages to inflation will contribute to protecting the purchasing power of their income and prevent them from falling into poverty. International experience has shown that such measures are the most effective in protecting the livelihoods of vulnerable groups. So it just linking, that's what he said. So linking pension, salaries, low wages to inflation will contribute to protecting the purchasing power. The only way I think that it would protect the purchasing power is if there was a cost of living adjustments, which is not mentioned, but I think that's probably what they mean. I don't want to assume, but I can't understand how linking them to inflation. They're already linked. So the House of Representatives discussed the session that they had with the Minister of Finance, Alawi. It said the council discussed during its hosting of the Minister of Finance the rise in the exchange rate of the dollar and its repercussions on the markets through the rise in prices and the damage to the poorest segment, and the discussion of public debt and the financial policies of the Ministry of Finance and the proposed treatments. So here's the thing, the more dollars you create, then you're going to get inflation. Think supply and demand, that lowers the value of your currency because there's so much of it out there. Those are the cause of inflation. So if you lower your purchasing power, it's going to take more dinars to buy things. You would think that would also contribute to inflation in the country, but that's not what this person's trying to say. Alawi warned during the session that reconsidering the exchange rate of the currency in an ill-considered manner would lead to financial chaos similar to some countries, so the trend was to set the exchange rate of the dinar comfortably to protect it from any external changes with the proactive and correct step in coordination with the central bank and to study it with the president of the government, heads of political blocs, and other parties, in addition to support of the IMF to change the price at a reasonable rate. No, I get it. You don't want to do it in an ill-considered manner. They have to sit down, obviously, to plan this out. In that one article, I pointed out that Alawi said when they devalued the dollar, it wasn't like they spontaneously did it. He said they voted on it 2 years ago. And so that the parliament was aware of what happened, and for them to try to act like they didn't know was BS, is what he was saying. So to me, it sounds like Alawi saying, look, we have to plan this out before we make a big change. Here's the thing that gets me. I can't imagine that slightly changing the exchange rate would cause so much commotion. I really don't. Now, I realize they voted on the devaluing of the dinar a couple years ago, but it's easy to adjust. That's such a minor amount. Well, I shouldn't say minor. It's 21.8%. I mean, it's not bad, but they can make the adjustment fairly easy versus if you have to really plan out a reinstated rate. That's different. This is where I'm constantly tossing back and forth in my head. Are they talking about reinstating the rate, or are they just talking about making a change? Or are they talking about revaluing the currency back up to the original exchange rate? Because this seems like a whole lot of hassle just to bring it back to the original exchange rate. But I don't want to jump to any conclusions, and I definitely don't want to blow smoke up people's tuchus. Alawi indicated that the benefits of devaluing the Iraqi dinar increased government's revenues by 23%, pointing out that the rise in prices in the Iraq markets was not due to the decrease in the exchange rate of the dollar only, but rather as a result of an increase in the global food prices since 2020. Yeah, since the RONA broke out. So, yeah, I get that. That makes sense. And like I said as well, they definitely wanted to pay back their debt with lower value dollars. The Minister of Finance explained that the rise in global oil prices is beneficial to Iraq and at the same time affects its needs of foodstuffs and oil derivatives and the import of gas that is used to generate electricity by 30%, noting that the Iraq external debt will be reduced by $4 billion in 2021. So you see the loans and everything, I think, were in the hundreds of millions. They could easily paid it off this year. So now I'm curious about what the real dollar amount is, because part of that chapter 7 they did mention it was only a few hundred million in debt that they owed. This is saying reduce 4 billion. That's a pretty big reduction. That's nice. Alawi suggests supporting the vulnerable segment of the society by allocating a direct grant to be distributed through the ration card or social welfare, or supporting small and medium-sized enterprises, especially in rural areas, as a result of the financial abundance resulting from the increase in oil prices. So yeah, you do have a surplus in money because of the increase in oil prices. Take some of that money and give them a cost of living adjustments. That'll help out the poor for now. But definitely getting advice from the IMF or World Bank on what you should do with your exchange rate, yeah, it's questionable. Again, they are part of a globalist movement. Anyways, that's it for now. Hit the thumbs up button. And if you're not a subscriber, please do so. Because when you do, it helps out the channel, and I surely do appreciate it. Let me know what you guys think. I'll talk to you later. I'm out.